I still remember the day my life shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. Not when my husband left, or when my father died. Those were merely cracks in the foundation. No, the true breaking point came in an opulent living room in Aspen, with snow falling outside like confectioner's sugar, when my daughter looked me in the eye and said the words I'll never forget. If you really want to help me, tomorrow, disappear. You're not family. Your baggage I've carried long enough. 24 hours before the Winter Charity Gala, the event that would cement her place among Colorado's elite, my own flesh and blood decided I wasn't worth keeping around. Me, Grace Holloway, the woman who had given up everything, so Sloan could have everything. But what my daughter didn't realize was that I still held the deed to the mansion she was living in, the mansion she was using to host her $10,000 a plate charity event, the mansion my father, Judge Holloway, had left to me. And if there's one thing my father taught me, it's that dignity isn't something you beg for, it's something you reclaim. This is the story of how I disappeared, just like she asked. But not before I left something in that empty vault that would bring the whole glittering charade crashing down. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a courier in a crisp black suit who looked uncomfortable standing on my modest porch. The envelope was thick cream cardstock with gold embossing that caught the light when I turned it in my hands. Mrs. Holloway? He checked his tablet. From Ms. Sloan Prescott. Nodded. Though I hadn't been Mrs. Holloway for nearly 20 years. Not since Robert walked out on us when Sloan was just starting high school. And the fact that my daughter was using her almost married name already, months before the wedding, spoke volumes about how desperately she wanted to shed the Holloway name. Inside was an invitation to the Aspen Winter Gala, the event Sloan had been planning for months, her big debut into Harrison Pierce's world of inherited wealth and old money connections. A charity event, allegedly, though I suspected the real charity case was my daughter's social ambition. There was a handwritten note attached. Mom, we need to talk about the gala. Come to the house tomorrow at 3. Wear something appropriate. No, please. No, I miss you. Just instructions, as if I were one of her many assistants or vendors. It had been 6 months since I'd last seen my daughter in person, at the engagement party where she'd introduced me to exactly 3 people before stationing me near a potted plant for the remainder of the evening. I picked up my phone and dialed Russell Avery's number. My father's old attorney had become something of a friend in the years since Dad passed. Russ? It's Grace. I need to talk to you about the house. The Colorado Springs house or the Aspen property? He asked, the question revealing just how much Sloan had kept me out of her life. I didn't even know she had moved to Aspen. Apparently the Aspen one, I said, my voice tight. The one my daughter is now living in. Ah. The pause that followed was laden with meaning. Grace, you never transferred the deed on that property. It's still in your name. A strange calm settled over me. I'm aware. I was waiting for her to, I don't know, show some appreciation, acknowledge what that inheritance meant to our family. And has she? I looked down at the invitation, at the cold formality of it all. No, and I don't think she ever will. The next day, I drove. The 2 hours to Aspen, watching the landscape change from the prairie flatlands to the rising majesty of the Rockies. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a navy pantsuit I'd bought for a job interview last year, with pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Not designer, but dignified. Appropriate, as Sloan had commanded. The house took my breath away when I pulled up. 3 stories of glass, and stone perched on the mountainside, with views that stretched forever. My father had bought it as an investment property decades ago, never imagining that his granddaughter would someday use it to host galas while keeping her mother at arm's length. A valet appeared as I parked, looking confused at my modest sedan among the luxury vehicles. I'm here to see Sloan, I said, handing him my keys. I'm her mother. His eyes widened slightly. Of course, Mrs. Holloway. Ms. Prescott is in the main living room with the event planners. The interior was even more impressive. Soaring ceilings, massive windows framing the mountains, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. People bustled about with clipboards and headsets, barely glancing my way as I moved through rooms that technically belonged to me. I found Sloan in the central great room, surrounded by a team of people hanging on her every word. She looked like a stranger, her honey blonde hair, dyed to match Harrison's family's signature shade, pulled into a sleek chignon, her body draped in what I assumed was a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. No, the ice sculpture needs to be centered, exactly between the 2 staircases, and the lighting needs to hit it from She stopped when she saw me, her professional smile faltering for just a moment. Mom, you're early. It's 3:05, I said, checking my watch. She glanced at her team. Let's take 15. As they dispersed, I got my first good look at the room's transformation. What had once been my father's dignified living space was now a shrine to excess, crystal chandeliers, gold-leafed moldings, and at the center, a strange glass case on a pedestal. What's that? I asked, nodding toward it. The legacy vault, Sloane said, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality I'd come to associate with her public persona. It's the centerpiece of tomorrow's gala. The Pierce family places meaningful heirlooms inside, symbols of their multi-generational wealth and honor. Harrison's father will open it during the ceremony, and the contents will be auctioned for charity. I nodded slowly, taking it in. And what exactly are you putting in there? Her smile tightened. That's actually why I asked you here. She lowered her voice. I need Grandpa's judge's gavel. The ceremonial one President Carter gave him. I felt as if she'd slapped me. Your grandfather's gavel isn't a prop for your social climbing, Sloane. It's not social climbing, she snapped. It's charity. And Harrison's family has a tradition. Harrison's family has more than enough heirlooms of their own, I interrupted. That gavel is one of the few things I have left of my father. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it made my chest ache. God. Mom, it's just sitting in your little rental house collecting dust. At least this way it would mean something. It already means something, I said quietly. To me, something in my tone must have gotten through, because she shifted tactics, her voice softening into the wheedling tone she'd used as a teenager when she wanted money for a school trip or a new dress. I need this, Mom. The Pierces are expecting something significant, something that shows I come from a respectable background. And you do, I said. Your grandfather was a federal judge. Your great-grandfather fought at Normandy. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. She laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the cavernous room. You really don't get it, do you? This, she gestured to her outfit, the house, the opulence surrounding us. This is who I am now. And tomorrow night, 300 of the most influential people in Colorado will be here to see it. And where will I be? I asked, already knowing the answer. Her expression shifted, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Shame, quickly masked by resolve. That's the other thing we need to discuss. She glanced around, making sure we were truly alone. I don't think it's a good idea for you to attend tomorrow. Despite anticipating this, the words still cut deep. I see. It's just, you don't fit with this crowd, Mom. You'd be uncomfortable, and honestly, your presence would raise questions I'm not prepared to answer. Questions like why your mother works as a bookkeeper instead of living off inherited wealth? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Questions like why you look and act the way you do, she said bluntly. The Pierces have a certain image to maintain, and I can't afford any distractions. I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing expensive clothes in a house that wasn't hers, and something inside me finally broke free. And what exactly am I distracting from, Sloane? The fiction you've created about your life? The story you tell Harrison's family about how you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps? You don't understand. No, I understand perfectly, I said, cutting her off. I understand that you're ashamed of me, of where you came from, of the sacrifices I made so you could stand in this room today and tell me I'm not good enough to be seen with you. Her face hardened. If you really want to help me tomorrow, disappear. You're not family. Your baggage I've carried long enough. The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. For a moment, the great room with its soaring ceilings felt airless, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out by my daughter's cruelty. I nodded once, then turned and walked away, my steps echoing on the marble floor. Not a single tear fell until I was in my car, driving down the winding mountain road, away from the glass house that held my shattered heart. The snow started falling as I drove back to Colorado Springs, fat flakes that made the road treacherous and visibility poor. It matched my mood, a blinding whiteout of emotions that made it difficult to see the path forward. I stopped at a roadside diner halfway home, one of those places with vinyl booths and waitresses who call you hun. I ordered coffee and sat staring out the window at the darkening sky, replaying Sloane's words in my head. Your baggage I've carried long enough. How had we come to this? My mind drifted back to the early days. Sloane as a toddler with wild curls and skinned knees. Sloane at 8, proudly showing off her science fair project. Teenage Sloane, devastated by her father's abandonment, but determined to make something of herself. I had given up law school when I got pregnant. Robert and I had been so young, so full of dreams. He was going to be a corporate attorney, and I was planning to focus on family law. But then Sloan came along, and someone had to stay home. After Robert left, I took whatever jobs I could find, bookkeeping during the day, waitressing at night, while getting an associate's degree in accounting through online classes. Every spare penny went to Sloan's education, the private high school that would look good on college applications, the SAT prep courses, the extracurriculars that would make her stand out. I'd lived in a one-bedroom apartment so she could have the opportunities I never had. And now I was baggage. The waitress refilled my coffee. "You okay, hun? You look like you've seen a ghost." I attempted a smile. "Just family drama." She nodded knowingly. "The holidays bring it out in everyone. My sister and I haven't spoken in 3 years over a pumpkin pie recipe." I laughed despite myself. "I wish it were that simple." "It never is," she said, patting my hand before moving on to the next table. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos of Sloan. Her high school graduation, where she'd hugged me so tightly. Her college acceptance letter, which we'd celebrated with dollar store champagne. The day she got her first apartment, small but all hers, paid for with the money I'd been setting aside since she was born. When had she changed? Was it gradual, or had there been a defining moment when my daughter decided I wasn't good enough anymore? Then I found what I was looking for. A photo of my father, Judge Thomas Holloway, standing in front of the Aspen house the day he bought it. He was smiling that particular smile of his, the one that suggested he knew something you didn't. "What would you do, Dad?" I whispered to the photo. The answer came to me with such clarity that I almost heard his voice. "You know exactly what to do, Gracie. You always have." I paid for my coffee and headed back to my car, my mind suddenly sharp despite the exhaustion. Instead of continuing home, I turned onto a different highway, the one that would take me to Russell Avery's office in Denver. By the time I arrived, it was nearly 8 p.m., but I knew Russ would still be there. He practically lived at his office since his wife passed. Sure enough, his window was the only one still lit on the 14th floor of the glass and steel building. I texted him from the parking garage, and he came down to let me in. Concern etched on his weathered face. "Grace, what's happened?" "I need to sell the Aspen house," I said without preamble. "Immediately." His eyebrows shot up. "That's a $7 million property minimum. These things take time, proper marketing." "I don't care about getting top dollar," I interrupted. "I care about getting it done before tomorrow night's gala." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, so the meeting with Sloan didn't go well. You could say that." I followed him into the elevator. "She told me to disappear." He whistled low. "That's cold. That's Sloan." The elevator doors opened onto his firm's floor, dark except for the light spilling from his corner office. "The thing is, Russ, I've spent my entire adult life making sacrifices for my daughter. I gave up my career, my dreams, my chance at a relationship after Robert left. And now she's ashamed of me because I don't fit into her new world of privilege and prestige. And selling the house is, what, revenge?" He looked troubled as he led me into his office. "Not revenge," I said, sinking into the leather chair across from his desk. "Clarity. She needs to understand that there are consequences to treating people the way she treated me today. And I need to finally start living my own life." Russell sat down heavily. "I understand the impulse, Grace, I really do. But this is a major asset. Your father left it to you as a nest egg, not as leverage in a family dispute." "My father left it to me to use as I saw fit," I corrected him. "And right now, I see fit to sell it to someone who will appreciate what it represents. Hard work, integrity, legacy." He studied me for a long moment. "You're serious about this?" "Deadly serious." He sighed, then reached for his computer. "I might have a buyer. The Holloway Veterans Foundation has been looking for a property to convert into a retreat and rehabilitation center for disabled vets. Your father was on their board before he passed." I felt a surge of emotion. "That would be perfect. They can't pay market value," he warned. "Maybe $5 million instead of 7 or 8. "I don't care," I said, and meant it. "As long as it closes before tomorrow night." Russell typed rapidly, sending off emails. "I'll need you to sign a mountain of paperwork, and we'll have to get creative with the closing timeline, but..." He looked up at me. "I think we can make this happen." For the first time since leaving Aspen, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you." "Russ." He leaned back in his chair. "Now, what about the gala? I assume Sloan is expecting to host 300 people at a house that will no longer be hers." I thought about it for a moment. The sale won't be public knowledge until after the event begins. Let her have her moment in the spotlight, then let her deal with the fallout. Grace, he said carefully, this isn't like you. The old me would have continued to be a doormat, I agreed. The new me is setting boundaries. He nodded slowly. What about the vault? The one they're planning to auction off? I smiled, an idea forming. I think I'll leave something in that vault after all, just not what Sloane is expecting. As I drove to a hotel for the night, unwilling to make the trip back to Colorado Springs in the worsening snow, I felt a strange sense of peace descending. For 20 years, I had defined myself solely as Sloane's mother, subjugating my own needs and dreams to hers. Tomorrow, that would end. Not with a bang, but with an empty vault and a new beginning. I barely slept that night. The hotel bed was comfortable enough, but my mind raced with thoughts of what I was about to do. Was I making the right decision? Was I being too harsh? Then I'd remember Sloane's cold eyes as she dismissed me from her life, and my resolve would strengthen again. By 6 a.m., I was up and dressed, waiting for Russell's call. It came at 7:30. It's happening, he said without preamble. The foundation board had an emergency meeting at dawn. They're prepared to close today. They've been looking for a property like this for over a year, and they don't want to lose it to a bidding war. How soon can we sign? I asked, already gathering my things. I'm heading to the office now. The paperwork will be ready by 9. But Grace, he paused, there's no going back from this. Are you absolutely certain? I thought about the decades I'd spent putting Sloane first. The nights I'd gone hungry so she could have new dance shoes. The promotions I'd turned down because they'd require travel. The retirement fund I'd drained to pay for her MBA. I'm certain, I said firmly. See you at 9. I had work to do before then. I drove to a small stationery store that had just opened, purchasing the finest paper they carried and a fountain pen that cost more than I'd usually spend on such things. But this letter needed to be perfect. Sitting in my car, I began to write. Not with anger, though I felt it simmering beneath the surface, but with clarity and truth. I wrote about love that gives without expecting return, about the quiet dignity of sacrifice, about the difference between wealth and worth. I wrote about my father's legacy, not of property, but of principle. And finally, I wrote about letting go. To the daughter who asked me to disappear, I'm granting your wish. By the time you read this, I will be gone from your life, not because I am ashamed of who I am, but because you are. Not because I am baggage, but because you have forgotten how to carry gratitude. This house was never yours to use as a stage for your reinvention. It was a gift from my father, entrusted to me, that I was saving for your future. A future I imagined we would share, but you have made it clear that your future has no place for me. So I am reclaiming my dignity and redirecting my father's legacy. The Holloway Veterans Foundation now owns this property. They will transform it into a place of healing for those who have sacrificed far more than comfort or convenience for others. I raised you to know the difference between what glitters and what shines, between status and character. I hope someday you remember that lesson. A mother's love should build, not blind. And when your child uses your legacy to climb, only to push you off the ladder, it's not unlove to walk away. It's dignity. I wish you clarity, Sloane. Not happiness. You already have the trappings of that. But the wisdom to recognize true worth when you see it. Grace. Holloway, the mother you're too ashamed to claim. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sorrow or regret. They were tears of release, of letting go of expectations I'd carried for too long. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into Russell's office to find him with the foundation's director, a retired Army colonel named Marcus Reeves who had served with my father in his younger days. Grace Holloway, he said, standing to shake my hand. Your father spoke of you often. He was immensely proud of the woman you became. I swallowed hard. Thank you. He would be pleased about this arrangement. More than pleased, Marcus said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Downright jubilant. We've been trying to establish a mountain retreat for veterans with PTSD and physical disabilities for years. This property is perfect. Secluded but accessible, with the kind of views that heal the soul. Russell spread the documents on the conference table. I've negotiated a price of $5.2 million, Grace. The foundation will take immediate ownership, but has agreed to allow the event tonight to proceed as planned, with the understanding that the property transfer will be announced at midnight. I nodded, scanning the paperwork. And they understand the property is currently occupied? Marcus looked uncomfortable. We've been briefed on the situation. We're prepared to give Ms. Prescott 30 days to vacate, which is more than generous given the circumstances. $5 million. It was a fortune by most standards, though well below market value for a property like the Aspen House. But money had never been my motivation. I'd like to make a donation, I said, surprising even myself. $1 million, back to the foundation, in my father's name. Russell's eyebrows shot up. Grace, that's a significant portion of the proceeds. It's what Dad would have wanted, I said simply. And I don't need that much. I have my house in Colorado Springs, my pension from the accounting firm. This is about setting things right, not enriching myself. Marcus looked stunned. That's extraordinarily generous. With that kind of funding, we could fully equip the physical therapy spaces and build the meditation garden we've been planning. I signed the papers with a steady hand, feeling my father's presence as I did so. Then I handed Marcus the sealed envelope. One more thing, I said. There's a vault in the main living room, a display piece for tonight's gala. I'd like this to be placed inside before the event. He took the envelope, looking confused. Ms. Holloway, we agreed not to disrupt the event until midnight. This won't disrupt it, I assured him. It will simply provide some much-needed perspective. After leaving Russell's office, I drove to a small cafe to gather my thoughts. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for years, the burden of trying to maintain a relationship with a daughter who saw me as an embarrassment, was lifting. In its place was a hollow ache, the grief of letting go. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Sloane. I listened to her voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Mom, where are you? I need Grandpa's gavel for tonight. Call me back immediately. Mom, this is ridiculous. The vault ceremony is the centerpiece of the entire event. I need that gavel. Harrison's father is asking questions. For God's sake, Mom, you're being childish. This is the most important night of my life. If you ruin this for me, I swear to God. I deleted them all without returning the calls. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a flight. Not a return ticket to Colorado Springs, but a one-way journey to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place I'd always wanted to visit but never had the time or money to explore. As I drove to the airport, snow still falling gently around me, I thought about what I was leaving behind. A life of constant accommodation, of shrinking myself to fit into the margins of my daughter's narrative, of accepting scraps of affection when I deserved a feast. And what lay ahead? Uncertainty? Yes. Loneliness, perhaps. But also possibility. Freedom. The chance to rediscover who Grace Holloway was beyond being Sloane's mother or Judge Holloway's daughter. My flight wasn't until 6 p.m., precisely when the gala would be beginning. I'd be in the air when the vault was opened, when my words were read aloud, when the foundations of Sloane's carefully constructed world began to crumble. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt light, as if I too were made of snow, drifting toward a new horizon. The plane was halfway to Santa Fe when I finally turned off my phone. Until that moment, I'd been clutching it like a lifeline, half expecting, half hoping that Sloane would call with something other than demands and accusations. That she would say she was sorry, that she understood, that she wanted to make amends. She didn't. Instead, I received a flurry of texts from Russell. The envelope has been placed in the vault. Attendance is at capacity. Local news crews are covering the event. Sloane looks frantic. She's asking everyone about the gavel. And finally, just before I switched to airplane mode, it's done, Grace. The vault has been opened. Your letter has been read. I've never seen a room go silent so quickly. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and imagined the scene. The glittering ballroom, the orchestra falling silent, the confused murmurs as the empty vault was revealed, save for my single envelope. Harrison's father, probably a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, opening it with a puzzled expression. And Sloane, her perfect facade cracking as her carefully constructed world began to unravel. Was it cruel? Perhaps. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to show them the truth they've been avoiding. The truth was that Sloane had built her new identity on a foundation of sand, on pretense and, denial, on the rejection of her roots and the erasure of my sacrifices. And foundations like that cannot stand. Would you like something to drink, ma'am? The flight attendant's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Just water, please, I said, then reconsidered. Actually, a glass of wine. Red, if you have it. It was a small rebellion. I rarely drank, and never on flights. But it felt symbolic. Somehow. A toast to my new beginning. When we landed in Santa Fe, the terminal was quiet, the late evening arrivals trickling through with sleepy determination. I collected my single suitcase, all I'd brought with me, and headed to the rental car counter. "You're in luck, Mrs. Holloway," the young man said, checking my reservation. "We've upgraded you to a premium model at no extra charge." I smiled, another small sign that the universe approved of my decision. "Thank you. And it's Ms. Holloway, actually." He handed me the keys. "Enjoy your stay in Santa Fe, Ms. Holloway." "First time visiting?" "First time," I confirmed. "But I might be staying a while." The night air was crisp and clear as I drove to the small casita I'd rented on the outskirts of town. So different from the heavy snow of Aspen, though the stars were just as bright, perhaps brighter without the light pollution of a resort town. The casita was exactly as advertised, a small adobe house with a tile roof and a walled garden, simply but beautifully furnished in the southwestern style. I set down my suitcase and wandered through the rooms, trailing my fingers along the cool plaster walls, breathing in the scent of piñon wood and sage. This could be home, I thought, not just a temporary refuge, but a real home. I made a cup of tea and sat in the small courtyard, wrapped in a blanket against the night chill. My phone remained off. Whatever was happening in Aspen, the fallout, the accusations, the damage control, it was no longer my concern. I had said my piece. The rest was up to Sloane. Sleep came easily that night, deep and dreamless. I woke to sunlight streaming through the skylight and the distant sound of church bells. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was or what had happened. Then it all came flooding back, not with the sharp pain I'd expected, but with a dull ache, like a healing wound. I made coffee and stepped outside to collect the newspaper that had been delivered to my doorstep. The headline was local, something about water rights and community gardens. But I found myself wondering if the Aspen Daily News was running a story about last night's gala and its unexpected conclusion. Around noon, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately began buzzing with notifications. Voicemails, texts, emails, most from Sloane, some from Russell, a few from numbers I didn't recognize. I started with Russell's messages. "The foundation has issued a press release about the property acquisition. Reporters are all over it." Sloane tried to claim the letter was a fake, but Harrison's father read it aloud before she could stop him. "The Pierce family is reconsidering the engagement. Their publicist released a statement about family values and transparency. Are you okay, Grace? Let me know you've arrived safely." I sent him a quick text assuring him I was fine, then braced myself and listened to Sloane's voicemails. The first few were incoherent with rage, screaming about betrayal and humiliation, threatening lawsuits and retribution. Then came the bargaining. "Mom, we can fix this. I'll tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. We can split the money from the house. Just call off the sale." "Please, Mom. Harrison's parents are talking about postponing the wedding. This is destroying everything I've worked for." And finally, the one that almost broke my resolve, left at 3 a.m. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please come back. I need you." But did she need me, or did she need what I could give her? The distinction mattered. I put the phone down without returning any of her calls. This wasn't about punishing Sloane. It was about finally respecting myself enough to set boundaries, to demand the basic dignity that had been denied me for too long. Later that afternoon, I visited a small art gallery in the center of town. The owner, a woman about my age with silver-streaked hair and turquoise jewelry, noticed me lingering over a landscape painting of the mountains at sunset. "That's one of my favorites," she said, coming to stand beside me. "The artist captures the quality of light here perfectly, how it seems to come from within the land itself, not just from above." "It's beautiful," I agreed. "It feels hopeful somehow." She studied me with kind eyes. "You're new to Santa Fe." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Just arrived last night. Visiting or staying?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I'm leaning toward staying." She smiled. "Santa Fe has a way of collecting souls who need healing. The light here doesn't just illuminate the landscape, it illuminates the spirit." She extended her hand. "I'm Eleanor, by the way." "Grace," I said, taking her hand. "Grace Holloway." "Well, Grace Holloway," she said. "If you're thinking of staying, we're looking for help here at the gallery. Nothing full-time to start, just a few hours a week. You seem like someone who appreciates beauty." I felt a smile spreading across my face. A real smile, not the polite mask I'd worn for so long. "I'd like that very much." As I walked back to my casita, the late afternoon sun painting the adobe walls golden, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not happiness exactly. The wound was still too fresh for that, but possibility. The sense that my story wasn't ending, but beginning anew. My phone buzzed again. Russell, the foundation is holding a press conference tomorrow to announce the veterans' retreat. They'd like you to say a few words about your father's legacy, if you're willing. I thought about it for a moment, then typed my reply. Tell them yes. It's time I found my voice again. The morning of the press conference dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in a simple navy dress with my mother's pearls, an outfit that represented who I truly was, not who anyone else wanted me to be. Marcus Reeves picked me up at my casita, his military punctuality evident in his arrival exactly at the agreed-upon time. "You've caused quite a stir, Ms. Holloway," he said as we drove toward Aspen. I'd flown back early that morning, not ready to face Colorado permanently, but willing to take this one step. "That wasn't my intention," I replied, watching the familiar landscape roll by. He chuckled. "Intention or not, it's happened. The story's gone viral. Mother sells mansion out from under social climbing. Daughter, the tabloids are having a field day." I winced. I hope the foundation isn't regretting its involvement. "Quite the contrary," Marcus said, his tone serious now. "Donations have poured in since the news broke. Your $1 million was just the beginning. We've received another $2 million in smaller contributions from people who said they were inspired by your story." I turned to look at him, stunned. "You're joking." "I never joke about funding," he said with a slight smile. "Something about your situation resonated with people. This idea that dignity matters more than status, that integrity trumps image. It struck a chord." We drove in silence for a while, my mind racing with the implications. I hadn't wanted to humiliate Sloan publicly. That wasn't the point. I had simply wanted to reclaim my own worth, to establish that there were consequences to treating people as disposable once they'd served their purpose. But now my private family drama had become public fodder, a morality tale for the masses. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. "Has there been any—" I hesitated. "Any reaction from my daughter?" Marcus kept his eyes on the road. She and her fiancé left for a previously planned trip to Europe the morning after the gala. The Pierce family's statement indicated they needed private time to focus on what matters most: family unity and shared values. So she had run away, just like her father had, all those years ago, when faced with difficulty. The press conference was held on the front lawn of the Aspen house, my father's house, now the future Holloway. Veterans Retreat. News vans lined the driveway, and a podium had been set up with the foundation's logo prominently displayed. I sat quietly as Marcus outlined the foundation's plans for the property: the renovation of the main house into residential suites for veterans and their families, the conversion of the grounds into therapeutic gardens and outdoor recreation spaces, the establishment of an endowment in Judge Thomas Holloway's name to ensure the retreat's operation in perpetuity. Then he introduced me, and suddenly I was facing a sea of cameras and microphones, the weight of public scrutiny pressing down. "My father," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "believed that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or square footage, but in how you used what you had to lift others up." I paused, gathering my thoughts. He bought this property as an investment, yes, but also as a legacy, a physical representation of the values he held dear: hard work, integrity, service to others. When he left it to me, I understood that it wasn't just a house, but a responsibility. I looked up at the soaring glass walls, remembering how proud my father had been the day he showed me the property. In turning this house into a place of healing for those who have sacrificed so much for our country, we're honoring not just my father's memory, but the principles he lived by. A reporter raised his hand. "Ms. Holloway, can you address the circumstances surrounding the sale? Your daughter has claimed she was blindsided during a charity event." I took a deep breath. I won't be discussing the private aspects of this situation. What matters now is moving forward with purpose and dignity. Another voice called out, "Is it true that your daughter told you to disappear the day before the gala?" I felt a flash of anger, not at the question, but at how my pain had become entertainment. What's true is that this property will now serve a higher purpose than hosting parties. That's what I'm here to celebrate today. Marcus stepped in smoothly, redirecting the conversation back to the foundation's plans, and I was grateful for the reprieve. After the formal statements, there was a small reception on the terrace. I stood at the edge, watching as donors and board members mingled, discussing the future of a house I had just let go. "You handled that with remarkable grace," came a voice beside me. I turned to find a tall, distinguished man with kind eyes extending his hand. James Pierce, Harrison's father. My heart skipped a beat. This was the man who had read my letter aloud at the gala. The patriarch of the family Sloane had been so desperate to impress. Mr. Pierce, I managed, shaking his hand. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm on the Foundation's Donor Advisory Board, he said. Have been for years. Your father and I served together. He as a JAG officer, I as a medical corpsman before I took over the family business. I hadn't known that. It seemed there was much about my father's life, and perhaps my daughter's, that I had failed to fully understand. I want to apologize, he continued, for my role in what happened. Had I known the truth about your relationship with Sloane, about the ownership of this house, well, things would have been handled differently. You have nothing to apologize for, I said honestly. You couldn't have known. He looked out over the mountains, his expression thoughtful. My son is young and impressionable. He fell in love with the image Sloane projected, this self-made woman with a compelling story of overcoming obstacles. I wanted to believe it too. Parts of it are true, I said, surprising myself by defending Sloane. She did work hard. She is intelligent and driven. But she denied the very foundation that made her success possible, he said gently. She denied you. I couldn't argue with that. Harrison is heartbroken, James continued, but better to learn this lesson now than after. They were married. And Sloane? I couldn't help asking. Have you heard from her? He nodded. She called Catherine, my wife, yesterday from Paris. Said she wanted to explain, to make things right. Catherine told her that making things right starts with making things right with you. A lump formed in my throat. I don't know if that's possible anymore. That's for you to decide, he said. But, for what it's worth, I think there's still a chance for reconciliation, if that's what you want. Sloane sounded different, humbled perhaps. As the reception wound down, I found myself walking through the house one last time, not as its owner, but as a visitor saying goodbye. In the great room, the legacy vault still stood on its pedestal, now empty, a symbol of hollow pretension. I placed my hand on the cool glass, remembering the letter I had left inside, words written in pain, but also in truth. Had they reached Sloane? Had they penetrated the armor of entitlement and image consciousness she had built around herself? Only time would tell. As I prepared to leave, Marcus approached with a small wooden box. We found this in the library safe, he said, handing it to me. It has your name on it. Inside was my father's pocket watch and a handwritten note in his distinctive script. For Grace, who always understood that time is the only true wealth we possess. Use yours wisely, my darling girl. Tears filled my eyes as I closed the box carefully. Thank you, I whispered, though whether to Marcus or to my father's memory, I wasn't sure. That night, back in my Santa Fe casita, I sat in the courtyard watching the stars emerge. My phone rang, Sloane's number. After 4 rings, it went to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. Mom, I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I don't blame you. But I'm coming to Santa Fe next week. I'd like to see you, if you're willing. I have a lot to apologize for. I stared at the message for a long time, weighing the years of hurt against the possibility of healing. Finally, I typed a simple response. The door will be open. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a beginning. The week before Sloane's visit passed in a blur of new routines and tentative beginnings. I started working at Eleanor's gallery 3 afternoons a week, discovering a talent for connecting visitors with art that spoke to them. I explored Santa Fe's winding streets and hidden courtyards, ate green chili stew in tiny cafes, and began to imagine a future here. Each night, I expected Sloane to cancel. Each morning, I woke wondering if today would be the day she would text with some elegant excuse. But the message never came, and suddenly it was Thursday, the day she had said she would arrive. I spent the morning cleaning the casita, though it hardly needed it. I bought fresh flowers for the table and prepared a simple lunch of soup and crusty bread. Not to impress her, those days were over, but because these small acts of hospitality were part of who I was, regardless of how I had been treated. At precisely noon, there was a knock at the door. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and opened it. The woman standing on my doorstep barely resembled the, Sloane I had last seen in Aspen. Gone was the sleek chignon and designer dress. Her hair was natural, the honey brown she had inherited from me, not the Pierce blonde she had affected. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, and her face was free of makeup, revealing the faint freckles she had always hated. But it was her eyes that struck me most, red-rimmed and vulnerable, meeting mine with a mixture of fear and determination. "Mom," she said softly. "Sloan." I stepped back, gesturing for her to enter. "Come in." She moved past me hesitantly, taking in the modest casita with its adobe walls and simple furnishings. So different from the glass palace in Aspen, from the life she had constructed for herself. "It's lovely," she said, and seemed to mean it. "Very you." "Thank you," I replied, leading her to the small dining table where lunch was laid out. "Are you hungry?" She nodded, sinking into a chair. "I drove straight from Albuquerque. The flight was difficult." I raised an eyebrow as I ladled soup into bowls. "Harrison didn't come with you?" "Harrison and I are taking a break," she said, her voice tight. "His father thought it best if we reassessed our relationship in light of recent events." I set the bowl in front of her, not commenting. This wasn't about gloating or saying, "I told you so." It was about truth, and whatever came after. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the tension between us thick enough to cut. Finally, Sloan set down her spoon. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to face what I've done." "Start at the beginning," I suggested, my tone gentler than I had intended. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and seeing her in pain still activated some deep maternal instinct I couldn't fully suppress. She took a shaky breath. "The beginning. I guess that was when I met Harrison at that alumni event in New York. He assumed I came from money. The way I dressed, the way I spoke, the schools on my resume. And I didn't correct him." "Why not?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked down at her hands. "Because for once, someone was seeing me. Not my background, not the scholarship kid, not the girl from the wrong side of town. Just me." "But it wasn't you," I pointed out. "It was a fiction." "I know that now," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. But it felt real. And then one lie led to another, and suddenly I was engaged to a Pierce and planning a life I thought I wanted. "A life that had no room for me," I said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. "I was ashamed, Mom. Not of you, of me. Of the fact that I was building this whole identity on a lie. Every time I looked at you, I saw the truth I was running from. So you pushed me away." She nodded miserably. "I told myself it was to protect my new life, but really it was to protect the lie. When you showed up at the house that day, looking so authentically yourself, I panicked. If the Pierces saw you, the real you, not some manufactured society mother, they might see through me too. So you told me to disappear." A tear slid down her cheek. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross, but I couldn't take it back. My pride wouldn't let me. I sipped my water, letting her words settle between us. "And now that the lie has been exposed anyway, now I'm trying to figure out who I actually am," she said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time, without the pretense, without the performance, because that's all it was, Mom, a performance I couldn't maintain. "And who are you, Sloan?" I asked softly. "When you strip away the designer clothes and the social ambitions?" She looked startled by the question, as if no one had ever asked her that before. Perhaps no one had. Perhaps I hadn't, too busy trying to give her every advantage to really see who she was becoming. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "That's what scares me the most. I've spent so long being what other people wanted me to be, what I thought I needed to be accepted, that I'm not sure what's left underneath." I nodded, understanding more than she knew. Hadn't I done the same thing, in my own way? Defined myself solely as Sloane's mother for so long that I'd forgotten who Grace Holloway was at her core? "So what now?" I asked. She straightened her shoulders. "I've withdrawn from the MBA program. I'm going to pay back the tuition myself. I have savings, and I've already found a job at a nonprofit in Denver. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." I couldn't hide my surprise. "What kind of nonprofit?" "Veterans Services, actually," she said with a rueful smile. The irony isn't lost on me, but when Mr. Pierce told me about the foundation's plans for the Aspen House, something just clicked. I remember how much Grandpa's service meant to him, how he used to take us to the Memorial Day parades and tell me stories about the men he'd served with. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the little girl she had been, earnest and open-hearted, hanging on her grandfather's every word. Before the masks, before the ambition, before the need to be something other than what she was. He would be proud of that, I said honestly. Would you? She asked, her voice small. Be proud of me, I mean. After everything? I considered the question carefully. I'm proud that you're here having this conversation. That takes courage. As for the rest, that depends on what you do next. She nodded, accepting this conditional response as the most she could hope for right now. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small velvet pouch. I found it when I was packing up my things at the Aspen House. I opened the pouch to find my father's judge's gavel, the ceremonial one President Carter had given him, the one Sloan had demanded for the vault. I was going to use it as a prop, she admitted, shame coloring her voice. To borrow status from Grandpa's accomplishments while denying yours. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. Insufficient to heal all wounds, but a start. A recognition, at least, of the harm done. Thank you for returning this, I said, running my finger over the smooth wood of the gavel. It belongs with family. Am I still that? She asked, her voice breaking. Family? I looked at my daughter. This flawed, struggling young woman who had hurt me deeply, but who was, undeniably, a part of me. Family isn't something you can erase, Sloan. Not with harsh words, not with distance, not even with betrayal. The question is what kind of family we want to be going forward. I want to make amends, she said earnestly. I want to earn back your trust if that's even possible. It's possible, I said carefully, but it will take time and work on both our parts. She nodded, wiping away tears. I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. We talked for hours after that. Really talked, perhaps for the first time in years. About her childhood, about the pressure she had felt to succeed, about the ways I might have unintentionally contributed to her belief that she needed to be someone else to be worthy. About my own journey these past weeks, my emerging sense of self beyond motherhood. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Sloan finally stood to leave. My hotel's in town, she said. I'll be here for a few days if you'd like to talk more. I would, I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. Perhaps you could come to the gallery tomorrow? Meet Eleanor. See where I'm working now. A tentative smile crossed her face. I'd like that. At the door, she hesitated, then reached out and hugged me quickly. An awkward embrace, but genuine. Thank you for not shutting the door in my face. That's not who I am, I said simply. As I watched her drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Caution, hope, lingering hurt, and something like peace. Not the peace of a story neatly concluded, but the peace of a new chapter beginning. One written on terms of mutual respect, not obligation or guilt. The gavel sat on my coffee table, a reminder of legacy and justice. But beside it now lay the possibility of reconciliation. Not guaranteed but within reach. 6 months passed like leaves turning in the New Mexico breeze. Winter softened into spring, and spring blossomed into a summer unlike any I'd known before. A summer of self-discovery and cautious healing. The gallery became more than just a job. Eleanor and I developed a friendship that reminded me there was life beyond family wounds, beyond defining myself through Sloan's success or failure. We expanded the gallery's community outreach, hosting art classes for local school children and veterans from a nearby rehabilitation center. You've got an eye for curation, Eleanor told me one evening as we closed up shop. The way you arrange the southwestern landscapes with Parker's abstract pieces, it's bringing in new collectors. I'm just following my instincts, I admitted. That's what makes it authentic, she replied. You're not trying to follow trends or impress anyone. You're listening to the art, and people respond to that. It was a simple observation, but it struck me deeply. For so much of my life, I'd been trying to anticipate others' needs. Robert's, Sloane's, even my father's. I'd rarely stopped to listen to my own instincts, to trust my own judgment. Sloane and I continued our tentative reconciliation through weekly phone calls and monthly visits. She had settled into her job at the Veterans Nonprofit in Denver, living in a modest apartment and, as she put it, learning to be comfortable with being ordinary. The director mentioned the Holloway Veterans Retreat today, she told me during one of our calls. They're planning the grand opening for next month. He asked if I'd help coordinate some of the Denver veterans who want to attend. That sounds perfect, I said, pleased by the synchronicity. Are you comfortable with that? Being associated with the retreat, I mean. There was a pause before she answered. I'm trying to be comfortable with all of it, Mom. The good parts of our family history and the not so good parts. The mansion being gone, the way it happened. It's all part of my story now. I can't keep running from it. Progress. Small steps, but progress nonetheless. The most significant change came in July, when I received an unexpected phone call from Russell Avery. Grace? You might want to sit down for this. I settled onto my patio chair, watching a hummingbird dart among my newly planted flowers. I'm sitting. What's happened? The foundation has established an endowment in your name, the Grace Holloway Dignity Fund. I nearly dropped the phone. They've what? $4 million, Russell continued, a smile evident in his voice. Earmarked specifically for single parents who need support pursuing education or career advancement. The announcement goes out next week, but I wanted you to hear it first. But why? I managed, genuinely bewildered. I didn't do anything extraordinary. That's where you're wrong, Russell said gently. You showed extraordinary courage in reclaiming your dignity. You chose integrity over convenience. You walked away from a toxic situation not with bitterness, but with grace, both literally and figuratively. I don't know what to be. Say you'll come to the dedication ceremony, Russell urged. It's being held at the retreat's grand opening next month. I agreed, though the prospect of returning to Aspen, of facing the memories and potentially the whispers, filled me with trepidation. When I told Sloane about the endowment during her next visit, her reaction surprised me. They're right to honor you, she said firmly, setting down her coffee cup on my patio table. What you did took incredible strength. It didn't feel like strength at the time, I admitted. It felt like desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing, she said, with a wisdom that made me look at her anew. Sometimes we're strongest when we have nothing left to lose. She hesitated, then added, I've been invited to speak at the ceremony. About Grandpa's legacy and the importance of honoring where we come from. Are you going to do it? I asked carefully. She met my eyes steadily. Only if you're comfortable with it. I don't want to hijack your moment or make it about me. 6 months ago, I would have been suspicious of her motives, wary of being used once again as a stepping stone for her ambitions. But the Sloane sitting across from me now was different. Humbled, yes, but also more authentic than I'd seen her in years. I think your grandfather would be proud to have you speak, I said finally, and so would I. The day of the dedication ceremony dawned clear and perfect, the Colorado sky an impossible blue above the mountains. The Aspen House, now the Holloway Veterans Retreat, had been transformed. Its cold opulence replaced with warm, welcoming spaces designed for healing and community. As I walked through the front door, I braced myself for a flood of painful memories. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of rightness, as if the house had finally found its true purpose. Marcus Reeves greeted me with a warm handshake. Grace, the woman of the hour. Hardly, I demurred. I'm just happy to see my father's legacy being honored this way. Your legacy too, he insisted, leading me through to the great room. Where the legacy vault had once stood, there was now a simple stone fountain, water flowing gently over river rocks. The room that had once been designed to impress was now created to soothe, the ostentation replaced with comfortable seating arranged in conversation circles, the cold, marble floors covered with natural fiber rugs. The ceremony was held on the back terrace, with the mountains serving as a breathtaking backdrop. I sat in the front row, listening as speakers praised my father's service, outlined the retreat's mission, and finally, announced the endowment in my name. When Sloane took the podium, I held my breath, unsure what to expect. My grandfather, Judge Thomas Holloway, used to tell me that our character is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in moments of challenge, she began, her voice clear and strong. He lived that principle throughout his distinguished career, but I learned it most powerfully through the example of my mother, Grace. She turned to look at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Many of you know the story, how I lost sight of what truly matters, how I valued status over sincerity, image over integrity, how I asked my mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for me, to disappear because she didn't fit the narrative I was trying to create. A murmur ran through the crowd. I sat very still, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. What you may not know is what happened afterward, Sloane continued. Yes, my mother sold this house. Yes, she left me a letter in an empty vault that exposed my carefully constructed lies. But then she did something extraordinary. She started over. At an age when most people are settling into comfortable routines, she moved to a new state, found a new career, built a new life. She gestured to the mountains surrounding us. She could have used her newfound resources to live a life of luxury, to show me up in some way. Instead, she donated a significant portion to this foundation and used the rest to quietly build a life of meaning and purpose. Sloane's voice grew softer, more intimate. That's the legacy I hope to honor today. Not just my grandfather's distinguished service or this beautiful retreat that bears our family name, but the quiet dignity of a woman who taught me, through her actions rather than her words, what true worth looks like. She looked directly at me now, no longer addressing the crowd. Mom, I'm sorry I didn't see your strength when I needed to learn from it most. I'm sorry I mistook your sacrifices for weakness. I'm sorry I was ashamed of the very foundation that made my life possible. The tears I'd been holding back began to fall. Freely now. The Grace Holloway Dignity Fund will help other single parents do what you did for me. Create opportunities, open doors, build futures, but no amount of money can repay the gift of unconditional love, even when that love had to take the form of difficult truth. After the ceremony, as people mingled on the terrace enjoying champagne and hors d'oeuvres, James Pierce approached me, his wife Catherine at his side. That was quite a speech your daughter gave, he said, extending his hand. Honest, heartfelt. She's finding her voice, I said, surprised by the pride that swelled in my chest. Harrison speaks of her often, Catherine said quietly. They've been in touch again recently. I raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. Don't worry, James said with a small smile. If there's a future there, it will be built on truth this time. We've all learned that lesson. As the reception wound down, I found myself drawn to the fountain that had replaced the vault. The plaque beside it bore a simple inscription, in honor of Judge Thomas Holloway and his daughter Grace, whose courage reminds us that true legacy is measured not in possessions, but in principles. Sloane found me there, standing quietly by the flowing water. They got it right, she said, nodding toward the plaque. Grandpa would have approved. I think so too, I agreed. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the water catch the late afternoon light. So, she said finally, what happens now? I considered the question, not just for our relationship, but for my life moving forward. Now we keep doing the work, building something real, finding our way back to who we truly are. Together? She asked, a vulnerability in her voice that reminded me of her childhood. Together, I confirmed, but also individually. You have your path, and I have mine. They'll intersect, but they don't need to be the same. She nodded, understanding the distinction. I'd like to visit Santa Fe. More often, if that's okay. I've been thinking about opening a branch office there for the nonprofit. I'd like that, I said honestly. Eleanor's been asking when you're coming back. She says you have a good eye for Southwestern pottery. Sloane laughed, a genuine sound that echoed in the room. High praise coming from her. As we walked out together, passing through the front door of what had, once been a symbol of everything that divided us, I felt a sense of closure. Not the neat, tidy kind you find in fairy tales, but the messy, ongoing kind that characterizes real life and real relationships. The mansion that had nearly destroyed us had been transformed into something healing. Perhaps we could be too. 1 year to the day after Sloane told me to disappear, I stood in Eleanor's gallery, surrounded by friends and colleagues, a glass of champagne in my hand, and a sense of accomplishment warming my chest. To Grace's first solo curation, Eleanor announced, raising her glass, and to the most successful opening night in the gallery's history. The small crowd cheered, and I felt my cheeks flush with pleasure. The exhibition, Dignity, Landscapes of Renewal, had been my passion. Project for months, bringing together artists whose work explored themes of transformation and rebirth. The centerpiece was a large canvas depicting the Aspen Mountains at sunrise, painted by a veteran who had spent 3 months in residence at the Holloway retreat. Speech, someone called, and I shook my head, laughing. You know I'm better with visual arrangements than words, I protested, but they insisted. Well, I began, looking around at the faces of people who had become part of my new life. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here. I was someone's mother, someone's daughter, but I'd forgotten how to be myself. I took a breath, finding my rhythm. This exhibition is about finding beauty after brokenness, meaning after loss. It's about the dignity of starting over. No matter your age or circumstances. I raised my glass. To new beginnings, and to all of you who've made mine possible. After the gallery emptied and Eleanor and I finished locking up, I checked my phone to find a text from Sloan. Just landed in Santa Fe. Can't wait to see the exhibition tomorrow. Dinner tonight? I smiled and replied with the address of my favorite local restaurant. Our relationship had continued to heal over the past 6 months, finding a new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Sloan had followed through on her plan to open a Santa Fe branch of her veterans nonprofit, and while her primary residence remained in Denver, she visited at least once a month. The restaurant was busy when I arrived, but Sloan had already secured a table on the patio, the soft glow of string lights illuminating her face as she waved me over. Mom! She stood to hug me, a real hug, not the awkward embrace of our early reconciliation. Congratulations on the exhibition. The Denver art scene is buzzing about it. Now you're exaggerating, I laughed, taking my seat. Only slightly, she admitted with a grin. But seriously, I'm so proud of you for building this new career. You've always had an eye for beauty. I just never appreciated it before. We ordered dinner and fell into easy conversation about her work, my gallery projects, the latest news from the retreat. It wasn't until dessert arrived that Sloane's demeanor shifted, becoming more serious. I have some news, she said, setting down her fork. 2 pieces, actually. Good news. I hope, I asked, noting the mix of nervousness and excitement in her expression. Yes, I think so. She took a deep breath. First, I've been accepted to a master's program in nonprofit management at the University of New Mexico. It would mean moving to Albuquerque full-time. Sloan, that's wonderful, I exclaimed. You'd be just an hour away. That's part of the appeal, she admitted. Being closer to you, continuing this. She gestured between us. This rebuilding. I'm touched, I said honestly. And the second piece of news? Her cheeks flushed slightly. Harrison and I have been talking again. Really talking. Not just... She trailed off, then started again. He's changed, Mom. Or maybe I'm seeing the person he always was, now that I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. And? I prompted gently. And he's moving to Albuquerque too, not to live together, she added quickly. We're both clear that we need to build something new from the ground up, not rush back to where we were. But he's been offered a position developing sustainable tourism initiatives for tribal lands in New Mexico. That sounds perfect for him, I said, remembering how Harrison had always seemed more interested in environmental issues than in the family's resort business. It is, Sloan agreed. He's been pushing back against his family's expectations too, in his own way. I think that's part of why we connected initially. We both felt trapped by other people's visions for our lives. I nodded, understanding more than she knew. And now? Now we're trying to build authentic lives, separately. But maybe, eventually, together. She looked at me anxiously. What do you think? I think, I said carefully, that you're finally asking yourself the right questions. Not, how will this look? Or what will people think? But, is this true to who I am? Relief washed over her face. That's exactly it. I wake up every day and ask myself, is this choice authentic to who I am and who I want to become? Then I'm happy for you, I said sincerely. For both of you. After dinner, we walked back to my casita under a sky blazing with stars. The little adobe house had become truly mine over the past year. Walls adorned with local art, a small studio space where I experimented with watercolors, a garden filled with native plants that attracted hummingbirds and butterflies. Would you like some tea? I offered as we stepped inside. Actually, Sloan said, reaching into her bag, I brought something to share. She pulled out a bottle of champagne and 2 crystal flutes. These were Grandpa's, she explained, setting them down carefully. I found them when I was going through some boxes in storage. As I prepared the tea, Sloan wandered through the living room, stopping at a small side table where a leather-bound journal lay open. Is this your memoir? She asked, her tone careful, respectful of boundaries we were still learning to navigate. I nodded, bringing the teacups to the coffee table. Just notes and memories for now. Eleanor thinks I should publish it someday. A story about reinvention at midlife. You should, Sloan said firmly. Your perspective is valuable. Mom, more people need to hear it. I smiled, touched by her enthusiasm. We'll see. For now, it's just for me. A way of making sense of everything that's happened. She sat beside me on the sofa, suddenly looking younger than her 32 years. Can I ask you something? Something I've been wondering for a long time? Of course. Are you happy? She asked simply. Not just okay, not just making The best of things, but actually happy? I considered the question seriously, looking around at my modest home, thinking about my work at the gallery, the friends I'd made, the sense of purpose I'd discovered. Yes, I said finally. I am. Not in the way I might have imagined happiness when I was younger, not the fairy tale version with perfect relationships and seamless endings, but in a deeper way that comes from living authentically, from being at peace with who I am. I touched her hand. What about you? Are you happy? I'm getting there, she said thoughtfully. I'm learning that happiness isn't something you achieve once and then have forever. It's a practice, a choice you make every day. Your grandfather used to say something similar, I recalled. Dignity isn't a destination. Gracie, he'd tell me. It's a daily decision. Sloane smiled. He was a wise man. He was, I agreed. And he would be proud of the woman you're becoming. Later, after Sloane had gone to her hotel, I sat in my courtyard under the stars, adding a few lines to my journal. A year ago, I thought I had lost everything. My daughter, my place in the world, my sense of purpose. I was wrong. What I had actually lost were the illusions that had kept me small, the compromises that had diminished me, the fear that had held me back. By asking me to disappear, Sloane inadvertently gave me the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to rediscover myself, to build a life based not on others' expectations or needs but on my own values and vision. The mansion is gone, transformed into something more meaningful than it ever was as a status symbol. My relationship with my daughter has been transformed too, not erased or forgotten, but rebuilt on a foundation of truth and mutual respect. And I have been transformed most of all. From Grace the mother, Grace the caretaker, Grace the invisible support system, into simply Grace, a woman with her own voice, her own path, her own dignity. As I look back, on that painful day in Aspen, I no longer feel the sting of rejection or the burn of humiliation. Instead, I feel gratitude for the cruel awakening that finally set me free. Sacrifice means nothing to those who see love as leverage, but self-respect? That's priceless and non-refundable. I closed the journal, listening to the desert night sounds, the distant coyote calls, the rustle of wind through the pinon pines, the soft hooting of an owl. Sounds that would have been foreign to me a year ago, but that now spoke of home. Tomorrow, Sloane would visit the gallery. Next week, I would begin planning my next exhibition. In the fall, perhaps I would finally take that pottery class Eleanor had been recommending. And someday, maybe I would finish my memoir, not for fame or validation, but as a testament to the possibility of renewal at any age. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but that was part of its beauty. For the first time in decades, I was writing my own story, page by page, choice by choice. And in that empty vault that had once held nothing but pretension, I had found something priceless after all. My own voice, strong and clear and uncompromised. To disappearance, I whispered to the stars raising an imaginary glass, and to everything that follows,